Welcome to Equilibrium Echoes, the podcast where we delve into the transformative power of your inner world on your relationships. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. Join me as we unlock the secrets of emotional equilibrium and dig deep into the tools and insights needed to foster healthier, more fulfilling relationships in ways that feel safe and authentic. Welcome back to Equilibrium Echoes. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker, and I'm here today with Kate Kripke. I am so excited about this conversation today. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are going to help every parent out there understand some of these dynamics that are happening in your home, things you might not even be aware of. And what I realized in talking to Kate prior to this conversation is just how much of the things we're consciously aware of as parents are affected by the things we are not aware of as parents. And so we're going to break all of that down for you today. Kate, thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm so excited to spend this time with you, Alyssa. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Kate is a maternal and child mental health specialist. She is a licensed clinical social worker, and I could give you her whole bio, but let's just hear from Kate herself. Kate, tell us about kind of who you are and what you do. Like, give us a little of your story.
A little of the story. Okay. Thanks for asking. So yes, I'm trained as a licensed clinical social worker, also a perinatal mental health counselor. That just means in my work life, I've been working to support mothers and often the new moms, so transition to motherhood. I founded a clinic in Colorado called the Parent and Family Wellness Center, which I ran for 15 years, and have just in the last handful of years shifted over to more of a coaching model, a more teaching, coaching, mentoring model. My work, I think, Alyssa, is like so many of us, initiated by my own upbringing. I was raised by two very high achieving, pretty perfectionist parents who by no means did not love me. They loved me deeply. And I was raised, I was a very anxious child. I had panic attacks as a kid. Interestingly, my parents approached their perfectionism and need to be high achievers in different ways. My mom died 8 years ago, but the last time I saw her when I was driving her to the airport, she told me she'd been running for class president every day of her life. And she was like so good at what she did. But I know, isn't that kind of an exhausting statement to think about?
Yes, absolutely.
And my dad was a little bit more of he sort of took his need to be a high achiever, and I would hate to call my dad a narcissist, but he certainly had those tendencies that I think came from a lot of insecurity. So anyway, point is, I was raised by high achieving, very anxious parents, and unsurprisingly, I was a very anxious kid. So was my brother. I struggled with a lot of need to be perfect and to be the good girl and to take care of other people much of my life. I then had my first child, who's now 18, and had very significant postpartum anxiety when she was born, and really came to realize through my own experience and also working with my clients that I believe most of maternal anxiety is not necessarily organic in nature, right? There's certainly biochemistry shifts and hormonal shifts that happen when we become a parent and give birth, but really what I've learned to understand is that most of our anxiety, our guilt, our emotional overwhelm, our burnout is quote unquote caused by these deeper unconscious beliefs that we have about ourselves and who we need to be in the world to feel successful and to feel like we belong and to receive love and appreciation. So when we bring that mindset to mothering, forget about it. There's so much uncertainty and unpredictability and chaos that we just end up feeling all the anxiety that we've been working so hard to not feel for the most of our life. So there's my synopsis for you, Melissa.
Yes. So I was thinking while you were sharing that is simultaneously encouraging and terrifying. Like it is, I think it's encouraging to realize that so much of what we deal with in our internal worlds, there's a very valid reason for it. It's terrifying to realize that we are at the same time often passing those things on to our children without even being aware of it. So let's just jump right in here, cannonball in with both feet. Talk about that
interaction and that kind of the intersection of like what we were raised with, what we internally believe, and what we pass on to our kids.
Yeah. So the sort of neurobiology behind this is that in the first, early years of our life, really when we look at hardwiring and neuroscience, we look at anywhere from like 0 to 5 to 0 to 12, right? But those early interactions we have with the world around us, our parents, our caregivers, our teachers, our communities, society as a whole, teaches us how to think of ourselves, right? And those interactions with our parents, I mean, we may have had parents who said, you have to be perfect to receive love and attention, maybe, but usually it's not that, it's not that obvious. It's more the
Right.
parent who, you know, um, we were raised by parents who wanted the best for us. And so they really pushed us to be the best in our class and to be on the best soccer team and to go to the best school and to, those parents who sort of worked so hard to provide everything for us that they thought that we needed, that we sort of got this message that we have to be perfect and excellent for them, right? That is one thing that I see a lot. Of course, we can have the total opposite where we have parents who are, have their own mental health challenges or substance abuse or real trauma in families where we learn that it's, we have to be a certain way to be safe. So many varieties of what this can look like. But for many of us, we were raised in situations where our brain learned that in order for me to get what I need to survive, to be seen, heard, and understood, to be cared for and loved, I have to feel a certain way, act a certain way, do certain things, behave a certain way, and be a certain type of person. Those get hardwired. That's our hardwiring. It gets pushed into our unconscious. So we're not necessarily thinking about all the time, but we learn to behave a certain way in life because of those things. In my experience, and I certainly would consider myself one of these sort of recovering perfectionist, recovering type A, all or nothing thinker, people pleaser. I certainly know that I was raised, for example, by very loving parents. I didn't have any big T trauma, thankfully, in my upbringing, but I certainly had, I think, a fair amount of what we might call relational trauma, situations with my parents where I had to show up a certain way in order to get what I needed. That serves us in many ways in our life. Alyssa, what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we can be motivated. The kind of critical thinking towards ourselves, the kind of be better, do more, can motivate us to achieve these amazing things in life. And then we become parents and we can take that mentality into parenthood with us and believe on one level that we're serving our children by, expecting big things from them and doing a lot for them to make their life a certain way. So we can feel like we're doing it for our kids. But I know for me, a lot of times I was doing it because I wanted to feel like a good mom. I wanted to feel successful in motherhood. So let's be clear, it is easier to mother a child who's well behaved. It's easier to mother a child who gets grades. It's easier to mother a child who's sits in their chair when they're eating or whatever, polite with adults. So
Right.
I think I may have gotten a little off track with your question, but I think it's really important, I think, for me as a mom and for the women who are listening to remember that these deeper fear-based beliefs that we have about ourselves, about maybe not being good enough unless ... not being okay unless ... we may or might be likely, is probably a better term, bringing those into our dynamics with our kids without realizing it.
Okay, so every mom now is thinking, what am I teaching my kids that I'm not even aware of? And what do I do about it? Because we all, like, we all have this experience of being able to look back at our childhood and realize the things that maybe we were taught that became these core beliefs that we have without even realizing it. So how do we start becoming aware of what we're teaching and what we're passing on to our children?
Beautiful question. And I think to your point, I invite everyone listening to this podcast to take a big, deep breath because all of us are doing this, right? We can't know what we don't know. And I want to make sure that this doesn't become this like fear-based like conversation where everyone goes away thinking that we've been terrible mothers. That is not the point. right? It's just like
Very, very true.
all like a solid sigh of relief. And I do think a lot of mothers are not feeling good. They may have on paper a life that they've always wanted, or they may be out there in the world sort of presenting as feeling really content and happy and joyful and connected in their lives, where behind closed doors or inside their skin and in their own heart, they're really struggling. And so that's something that I think we can help kind of address for those folks. So to answer your question, the first thing is to ask ourselves that very vulnerable, brave, but important question. How am I feeling? Not what am I doing? Not what does my life look like? But not how are my kids doing? But how am I actually feeling? I have a very strong belief, and this won't be new to you, Alyssa. It may be kind of foreign to some of your listeners, maybe, but I kind of work in my own life and with women on this platform of the results of our life, right? How we feel in our life is directly related to the beliefs that we have about ourselves and what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so that's where we get to begin to get really curious with self-compassion, not with self-criticism, which many of us are used to, but with self-compassion, right? And the question then becomes, how do my deeper beliefs about myself, for instance, I'll just use myself as an example. I had a deep belief about myself for much of my life that I'm not okay, that there actually must be something a little bit wrong with me. And where did I get that from? I mean, in a nutshell, both my parents were anxious. They were frenetic a lot of the time. I, kind of was acting a certain way to make sure that I was the good kid, but inside I sort of felt like an imposter, right? So there's a little bit of this, I'm not okay in there. That deep belief, which I wasn't conscious of, but it was buried in there, would lead to the kind of more conscious thoughts that I had. For instance, but let's take it out of motherhood for a moment. I would call someone, they wouldn't call me back. And the thought would be, they must not like me. They must be mad at me, right? So our beliefs lead to our thoughts. Our thoughts lead to our emotions. My emotion is anxiety, distress, despair, fear.
Right.
Our emotions lead to our behaviors or our actions. That might look like anything from sending a really mean email to the person about how awful they are for not calling me back, or it might mean that I start spiraling and thinking about all the other people that don't like me, right? And the results of my life might be that I don't have very secure relationships.
Yeah.
And I think in motherhood, this is really profound, because if I have a belief that I'm not okay, I'm actually going to be seeing in my children evidence of both my not being a good mom, but also them not being okay. So I think that the question is, how do we figure out what those beliefs are? I think we need to ask ourselves those really hard questions. What might I be believing about myself that's starting that process? Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. But I'm thinking about a lot of the women that I've talked to in coaching. And one of the questions that everyone seems to run into, or at least I would say most people run into, is how in the world do I even figure that out? Because as middle-aged women, young adult, like, we are so conditioned to put our own needs and wants last. We're conditioned to not spend time thinking about ourselves and what's going on. We're always so outward focused. I find a lot of women, in my age, in their 40s, 50s, by this point, we've completely lost track of ourselves, right? So how do we even start doing that?
So many of us really know that there are things that we want or need to be doing to feel better, to take care of ourselves, that we may not be doing. Many of us know that we should be getting to bed earlier. Many of us know that we need to exercise more. Many of us know that we need to say or want, God forbid we have wants, right? Want to say no to tucking my child into bed so that I can say yes to going to hang out with some friends who I haven't seen for a while, or going on a date, or whatever the thing is. Maybe just taking a bath. And
Right.
then the question becomes, what are you telling yourself about those things? Because I want folks to remember that the way we feel is directly related to a thought we're having, whether it's conscious or unconscious.
Yeah.
What is the belief that I'm telling me? If I feel guilty, we all know that mom guilt. If I feel guilty, what am I telling myself about the thing that I'm doing that apparently is the wrong thing to do? What's the quote unquote rule I'm breaking? And I think that's where it starts, Alyssa. So, in many situations, I'm sure with your clients and many of your listeners, they may say, well, I mean, have feelings like it's selfish. It's selfish for me to prioritize myself,
Yep.
or I don't have time, or, you know, but my child needs me, but so and so might be disappointed. Okay. And what are you telling yourself about that? So we're sort of going below the surface in the onion to get to that core belief. And then, of course, there's a process of challenging and changing those beliefs. And I'm happy to talk you through my process for that if you think that would be helpful in this moment.
Yes, absolutely.
You want to play with it with me for a minute?
Sure.
You want to put yourself in the hot seat?
Of course. Why not?
So can you think for a moment of some fear you have that has sort of turned into some belief you have about yourself? It could be big or small, that you recognize is probably getting in your way of what you most want and need to feel the way you want to feel in your life.
It's challenging because I can think of a lot that I've already kind of unpacked, but let's see. What would be one that I haven't unpacked totally? Okay, here's one. So I still find myself doing a lot of people pleasing around, especially around this. I get really uncomfortable when I'm in a situation sometimes where I know I have to say something that the other person is going to disagree with. And I will backpedal and I will soft touch it and I will do all the things because there is still part of me that's uncomfortable with the thought that if I say that, they're going to disagree with me.
Amazing. And Alyssa, just for you and me, because I can totally relate, and I'm sure that many of the listeners can, would it be fair to say that what you're most fearful of is how that other person might feel or how you might feel? What is it about?
I think it's more about how I will feel because I'm okay with the fact that other people experience their own discomfort in life, right?
Totally.
I don't know that I'm so much. I think it's more about like, what will that say about me? If they tell me I'm wrong.
If they tell you you're wrong. So can you underscore a belief that you have about yourself or what's important for you in the world around you that leads to this sort of discomfort around the situation you're describing?
Around being wrong.
Yes, exactly. Which, by the way, you are like inside my brain right now, so I'm right there with you.
Well, and I'm a firstborn. I definitely lean more toward type A. So this is kind of a constant thing for me. Is like, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be messy. I know that intellectually, right? But it doesn't always show up in my relationships. I think when I'm looking at a conversation, I'm thinking I need to say this thing to this person and they're probably not going to like it and they're going to disagree with me. I think I have two thoughts around that. One is this need to be so sure of my statement that I feel like I can defend it against any argument they might possibly come up with. So then I would do the overthinking thing, like how can I anticipate their reaction in 27 different ways to prove that I'm right? And then the other thought I have around that is it even my place to speak up? Like, do I even have the right to challenge them on whatever thing that they're doing? Okay. And I think both of those things go back to my childhood, which was very much like Mom and dad were very authoritative, and what they said went. There was very much a requirement of unconditional obedience, and if you wanted to talk about it, that had to happen later, after you had already obeyed. So I don't know that I totally have that connected, but I think those two things are probably related.
So I hear two potential limiting beliefs if we start at the beginning of this pipeline. Then I'm going to say them back to you, and I'm curious if they resonate, and I certainly think a bunch of your listeners can resonate with this. One is I have to be right and certain to be okay, or to be valued, or to be liked, or fill in the blank. And the other is my words and needs and perspectives don't matter.
Yeah, I would say that both of those are present on some level.
Now, I think you and I can both agree, because we're both in the field of like coaching and mental health and psychology, that we understand intellectually.
Oh, absolutely.
We can intellectualize our way, but our nervous system doesn't necessarily fully buy the alternative yet.
Right.
Which I think this is where these things become unconscious, because on a conscious level, we can say, well, of course I don't have to be right all the time. Right? Or we can say, of course my wants and needs matter. But unconsciously, our body is still leading the way with like, be careful. Something bad might happen.
Yeah.
So,
and this is where we run into this self-sabotage thing, isn't it? Like, this is why we sabotage ourselves and we don't even understand what's happening. We're like, I know better, right? I know differently. Why am I not doing differently? It's because, I'm getting ahead of you, I think, a little bit, but because that subconscious is coming into play and we're not even necessarily in control of what's happening.
Not only that, but if we don't do this hard work that you and I are talking about right now, and it's hard work, it's brave work, but it is freeing work, we will unintentionally project those deep fear beliefs onto our kids. I think that's what we're getting at here, right? Is that I will parent my child by modeling unconsciously that I have to be right and certain to be okay, which means that my child has to be right and certain, or, I have to make sure that they are getting it right, that they're following my rules, right? And I'm going to model that my wants and needs don't matter, which will intentionally send the message to my child that their wants and needs don't matter. And so that's where we want to be careful. But as a process, I love that I hear your kiddo in the background, by the way. I think it's like so flippin' perfect.
She's yelling for me to come wipe her butt in the next bathroom. And I was just texting my older daughter saying, would you please take her?
Please don't cut this out. It is so flippin' perfect for this conversation. So perfect. Okay. So here is what I will offer you up. And I think I'll take you through this, but I also would love for all your listeners to be thinking themselves about how they might answer these questions, because this is it. And if we talk about, just to go back again, from my perspective, just to remind you and your listeners, maternal and child mental health are so deeply interconnected. So if I believe that I have to be right and certain to be okay, I'm unintentionally sending some of that to my child. Right? And my child is going to believe that they have to be right and certain to be okay. Right there, I'm sort of unintentionally sending these messages to my child, which means my child's going to be less quote unquote okay in times of uncertainty, or when they don't know the answer, like trying to do homework, or, whatever the thing is. Also, this one about my needs and wants don't matter. I can say to my child, of course your needs and wants matter, right? Or whatever language I'm using. But if they're watching me put myself on the back end because I'm self-sabotaging, forget about it.
Exactly. Yes. Like if they learn so much more from what we do than they do from what we say.
Yes.
And I think they're also geniuses at figuring out when we really believe something versus when we're just saying it because it sounds right to us.
Well, because they're not just listening, they're picking up on our body posture and our facial expressions and the tension in our body and the tone of voice and our breath pattern and even our odor, our body scent. When we're anxious and stressed, our kids know that. They know that. So we can say one thing, but when our body is saying something else, there's an incongruence. And that is actually can be very confusing for our children. And again, we don't want to blame parents ever, ever, ever for our children's behavior or what's happening for them. This is not a blame game, but the question is, what part might I be playing in the things I'm seeing in my kids that quote unquote aren't working for whatever reason? And that's really why we're doing this kind of work, because when we can unhook ourselves from these deep unhidden beliefs, and we'll do that in a moment, we can actually set our kids free from this legacy of high achieving, people pleasing, self-sabotaging pipeline, which I think many of us, we could go generations of parents who are doing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's go back just for fun to these two. So is there one you want to play with? One was I have to be right and certain to be okay, and the other is my wants and needs and perspectives don't matter.
I think the first one is probably the one that I've done the least work around.
Perfect.
So let's do that.
Let's play. Okay. So first of all, can we, for the purpose of this discussion, define okay as still breathing?
Okay. Yes.
Right?
Good. Because I was afraid you were going to make me define it.
No.
We can go with that.
I think many of us have this assumption that mental health and being okay means that we feel good.
Yes.
And without diving down another rabbit hole, I do want to, for the purpose of this conversation, make sure that we're all on the same page that mental health means that we're willing to feel all of it. The good feelings, and also the uncomfortable feelings. When we're willing to feel all of it because we understand the feelings and emotions are never the problem, they always make sense. We can say, I can both feel anxious, uncomfortable, disappointed, scared, sad, angry, and still be okay.
Yes.
Still be steady.
Yes. I love that. I often tell clients your nervous system thinks anything that is not dead is good. Like if we didn't die, it's all good. Same. Like it's really is that rudimentary, the way that our subconscious and our nervous system interprets the data, so to speak. So I love that definition. If we're still breathing, it's okay.
So we're saying the same thing. So I have to be right and certain to be okay. And your nervous system, to your point, Alyssa, when you're wrong or uncertain or someone else thinks you're wrong and then stirs up all that stuff in the inside, your nervous system is going danger, 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 right? And as you talk so much, I'm sure, about this podcast and with your clients, our body doesn't know the difference between real and perceived threat. So okay means I'm about to die. Not okay means I'm about to die.
Yes. And we all know we never died because someone else thought we were wrong. We know that. Again, back to that like conscious thought versus the subconscious.
So when you have the thought, when you're sitting here with me and you have the thought, I have to be right and certain. I have to make sure other people believe that I'm right and know I'm right. And I have to be certain in order to be okay. How do you feel in your body when you say that thought to yourself?
Oh, anxious. Definitely.
And where in your body do you feel that?
In my throat, usually.
Okay. Like a tightness? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question, and I'm borrowing from lots of people who came before me and tweaking it a little bit, right? Byron Katie does a lot of this. But the next question is, is it possible that that belief is not true? Is it possible that it's not true, that you have to be right and certain and people have to believe that you're right in order for you to be okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And who would you be? Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, though, I want to point out, though, that 5 years ago, I think my immediate reaction would have been no. And so I just want to say that for the sake of our listeners. Like, if you're more at the beginning of your journey in this, your answer might be no, and that's okay.
Well, let's pretend it's no for a moment for your listeners.
Okay.
Right? Let's say you're like, no, it's not possible that I'm not okay. Then I would ask you, Alyssa, so if I surveyed every single person on this planet and I said, is it 100% fact that if people disagree with Alyssa, she's not going to be okay? Would every single person say that is a fact?
Of course not.
Of course not. So all we're looking for is like a 1% possibility that this belief or this thought is not a fact. That's what we're looking for in this exercise.
Got it. Got it.
All right. So who would you be, Alyssa, or how might you move through your world differently if you didn't have that belief?
I think I would be more. It would help me cut down on all that overthinking, and I would be much more willing to just say what I think without 17 arguments happening in my head first.
Yeah. You'd trust yourself more.
Yes.
You'd move through hard conversations with more ease. You'd probably feel a little different in your body.
Right? Yes. Maybe even stop being less anxious about a potential conversation that hasn't even happened yet. Because I wouldn't be working so hard to make sure everyone thought I was right.
So you might be less distracted. By the way, is something that happens in mothering all the time because we get so stuck in our head with guilt and anxiety and ruminating and woulda, coulda, shoulda that we're pulling ourselves away from what might be happening right here in the moment. Okay. So what is another possibility that's at least as true as that one? Another belief that's at least as true, but different, that's a little more realistic than that first one. I have to be right and certain to be okay.
So if I was looking for a thought that maybe didn't feel completely unrealistic, that I could replace that one with, it might be something like, everyone's wrong occasionally, and it's okay to be wrong.
Okay, great. And how does that feel in your body? Does your body
much
believe
better.
that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Some other ones that people might try on might be, it's possible that I don't have to be right and certain to be okay. It's possible. Or maybe, this is a little long-winded, but for every human on this planet is a different reality. So there's really no one right and one wrong, right? To sort of broaden this perspective of right versus wrong. So we can kind of think about this in a lot of different ways. Were you going to say something else about your new belief, your new thought?
No, I was just thinking, I think when I first started really doing this work, one of the thoughts that helped me a lot was, everyone is wrong occasionally.
Yes.
And if I believe that being wrong makes me bad or says something negative about me, then I have to logically convey that. Let me reverse that because I'm not communicating it very well. If I believe that being wrong makes me bad, why don't I believe that about everyone else?
Yes.
It's much easier for me to have grace for everyone else because I believe it's normal and human to make mistakes, but I'm not applying that same grace to myself.
Yeah.
And I think that helps sometimes too. That's helped me a lot is why am I not showing myself the same compassion and grace that it's so easy for me to show to other people?
Yeah.
Not to derail your train of thought there, but
it's perfect.
But I have thought about that a lot. Why is the standard different for me? Right. And that sometimes helps me adjust my expectations of myself to more match what I expect of other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So say that new belief again.
So I guess the new belief would be, if I believe it's okay for other people to be wrong, I can apply that same standard and grace for myself.
And when you say that to yourself again, how do you feel in your body?
Much calmer. Kind of feels like a deep breath.
Yeah. So that's what we're looking for. So for your listeners, you might have to try several until you feel that, because we want to find a belief and a thought that resonates with our nervous system.
Right.
And then the final step is the most important one, which is, what is one small action step that you can take from this place with this new belief and this new somatic experience in your body? And if we don't take the action, nothing changes.
Right, because that's how we change those neural pathways and that
Exactly.
nervous system. Yes.
And so,
Um, Go ahead.
nope. I think that do you have we don't have to keep going on this for you personally, but do you have a quick answer of what might one something be that you could do from this place?
I think I think one thing that was helpful for me and is still helpful for me is to make some notes at the end of the day about how I felt when I'm really addressing a certain thought. When did I think that? How did I feel? What could I have done instead? Like it's the awareness of
Yeah.
like, and maybe even writing out in my scenario, like how would I have approached the situation if I was someone else? Like how would I have treated someone else who was in the same situation versus how did I treat myself?
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about writing it out too. I feel like when we take those thoughts that we're having and we put them on paper and we look at them more objectively, most of the time we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I even thought that. Like, but we have to bring that awareness to it, right?
And I'd love to just also, yes, 100%. I'd love to also offer that final step, right? We've said, what's the belief? How am I feeling in my body? Who would I be if I didn't have that belief? What's a new belief? How do I feel in my body? What's an action step? When we take that action step from that new place, it can be as simple as taking a deep breath or feeding myself lunch or, taking, sitting down at dinner tonight and saying to my family, because I want to circle it back to mothering, saying to my family, let's all go around this table and say one thing that we were wrong about today. Right? It's what if we believed that it was really okay to be wrong, that we didn't have to be right all the time. How would we be moving through our life and doing that thing? And when we tie it back into motherhood, so often this is actually a perfect belief to be role playing here for our listeners, because I think many of us high achievers believe that we have to know the answer. We have to know what to do. Those moments of uncertainty and unpredictability in motherhood can feel so debilitating to us because we need to be right and we need to have the answer and we need to keep moving things forward. And again, we will unintentionally both bring anxiety to the table with our kids if we're trying to parent from that place, and our kids will inherit our anxiety when that happens. I certainly did. I think you and I can speak to many women we've worked with who have.
Absolutely.
And we will unintentionally send our message to our kids that being wrong or not knowing what to do or not having the right answer is dangerous. So
Yes. And I love what you just said there about like coming to the dinner table and asking your kids like, what's something you were wrong about today? What were we all wrong? Because what I got from that was when we're working on these things ourselves, all we have to do sometimes when it comes to parenting is be transparent about that and bring our kids into that conversation. And not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean we're sharing all of our insecurities and our beliefs with them and telling them all the things. It's about when we're taking those action steps, they can be included in that, and that alone will start to teach them a different way. And it also shows them that like mom's doing some work on her. Mom is changing. And that's good and it's okay and it's right. And I think there's so much value in that kind of transparency with our kids.
when we look at secure attachment, which is really a clinical way of saying the quality of our relationship with our children, when we look at that, I've never met a mother that does not want her child to be healthy and happy and successful and well and all those things. When we look at how we show up as a mom, many of us get focused on what are we doing for our children? You know, how are we providing for our kids? And we solve problems and we, work hard to contribute financially, and we, plan ahead, and we research schools and summer camps, and we're doing all of these things. And I really want mothers to understand that what our children need most from us is to be seen, heard, and understood in the moments of both comfortable emotions, but also uncomfortable emotions. Those moments of emotional, let's just say, discomfort. And one of the things that happens is if we have a belief like, I need to be right all the time, and I need to know what's happening, and I need to be able to fix problems, and I need to make sure that my child is okay all the time, and I need to make sure my child never feels any pain, or I'm not a bad mom, then I will be in my head in those moments and distracted from that like that beautiful opportunity to just be steady and present. And so that's why this whole practice is so interesting. If we look at the, how do we help our kids come forward when they're feeling uncomfortable because they don't know the answer or they're uncertain?
Right.
And if we want our kids to come to us in those moments and we want to be steady in those moments, we have to be, to use this example we just did, willing to be uncertain and wrong ourselves. Because if
Yes.
not, they are not going
Yes.
to think it's safe to come to us when they're feeling uncertain and wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And just letting it be okay to sit with, we're all uncertain and uncomfortable right now. And I think letting go of that need to fix it all the time, like it gets in the way of being present, like you're saying.
Yes, many of us, because of our upbringing, have fear-based limiting beliefs about uncomfortable emotions. If I feel or my child feels an uncomfortable emotion, disappointment, sadness, fear, anger, you name it, something is wrong. Something bad is happening, right? Or something's wrong with me, or something's wrong with my child. And that is one of those beliefs that we could do that whole pipeline with, right? Because what we want to be able to do as secure parents so that we can both live our lives in a way where we're not stuck in our head and feeling guilty and anxious and self-critical all the time, but also parenting from that place is to be able to say, what if the feeling is not the problem? Right? What if this emotion that I'm feeling or my child feeling isn't a problem? If I believed it wasn't a problem, what might I be doing in this moment? I probably wouldn't be fixing or freaking out because they're freaking out or keeping myself busy so I don't have to sit in the discomfort.
Yes. I just saw this play out recently with my 4-year-old. So this is kind of a very surface level example, I suppose. But we've gotten in this pattern lately where she's getting to bed later and I'm having to wake her up every morning for school. And she hates being woken up. She wakes up very slowly and she's always grumpy about it. And so we've been starting every morning. I noticed we were starting every morning with, I don't want to get up. Like I'm let me sleep, Mom, go away. Like that kind of like grumpy response. And at first I started trying to talk her out of that. I was like, it's going to be a fun day. You're going to go to school and today is this and today is that. And it, which only intensified her reaction. And I a few weeks ago, I had this moment where I was like, that's not really what I realized. That's not really what she needs from me in that moment. And so I started waking her up and she's like, when she says, I'm so tired, just let me sleep, Mom. I just say, me too. Like, I would love to go back to bed too. Do you need a hug? And instead of trying to fix her attitude or her discomfort or whatever, right? Because I initially, I think a part of my thought was, like, I do not want to deal with a whiny 4-year-old for the next hour getting ready for school, right? I was making it about me and my discomfort. That's right. And when I shifted to what does my daughter really need from me right now, and I just empathized with her and allowed a minute to just sit on the bed and hug her, it actually took care of my problem because she's less grumpy. But it also was really powerful, I think, in the way that that I was showing up for her and the way that she felt seen in that moment. So just a little teeny tiny example, I think, of how this can play out on a really practical level.
It's
for us.
Perfect example. It's a perfect example. And I think if we're not paying attention, most of us in that moment would be like, come on, time for bed. You're fine. You're going to be fine. We don't want to, we think to ourselves, I don't have time for that thing. I don't have time to pause with her and her emotion. And I get that. And except we've all been there. And the more we try to talk our kids out of how they feel, the more loud they get. So you're
Right.
right. It's just that, like, yeah, I totally get that. Mornings can be really hard. I'm tired too, on your point. Yeah, of course you're tired. Of course. Would you like a hug? Okay, and let's bring your tired body down to breakfast. Right? It's
Yes.
like you don't
Right.
have to not feel what you're feeling to keep moving.
Right.
But we want to
Yes.
start with that. Of course. Of course you feel that way. No problem.
Yes. Just by validating her emotion, like you said, she didn't continue to escalate,
Yes.
which was an attempt to get me to see and respond and hear her. She then felt seen and understood, and so she was able to then we were both able to then move on with her day. And it took 90 seconds, right? It wasn't something that I had to derail my entire morning to deal with. And I think that was really a mindset shift for me too, of like, hold on, holding space for my kids' emotions and validating them and being there in the way, showing up in the way they need me to, doesn't have to take hours, and it doesn't have to derail my day. And in fact, sometimes it has the opposite effect. Like, I can get your whole day back on track because
it's not about doing more.
Yes. Yes. So that was really powerful, and that just happened recently, so I thought I was realizing how applicable that was to this conversation.
It's beautiful. And some of your listeners may have some fear-based beliefs about emotional discomfort, right? So that's why we want to come back to sort of what's our belief. I mean, my 30-second example just happened the other day. That's like your example, is that my 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old was going to dance, and she came down 20 minutes before we were supposed to leave for dance in tears. And I said, "Oh, babe, what's going on?" She said, I'm just so sad. And I know that in a previous time in my life, I may have been like, "Why? What's wrong?" "Okay, what do you need? What do you mean you're sad?" Like this desperation to fix her sadness.
Right.
Now what I've learned to do is I said, "Oof, did something happen today?" And she said, "No, nothing happened. I don't know why. I'm just feeling sad." And I said, wow, it's hard to feel sad and don't know why. And I get it. I have been there. And then I said, "Is there anything you need from me? Do you want me to make you a cup of tea? What can I do for you?" And she said, "No." She said, "I don't really want to go to dance today." And I said, "Okay, help me understand why." And she said, "I just feel like I don't want to show up and pretend I'm happy when I'm feeling sad." And I said, "It sounds like you just want to give yourself some space to feel sad." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." And she went up to her room and she put in some music, and within, she came down not that long after, and she was in a very different space. But the point is, I didn't do anything. I
Yes.
didn't do anything. There was no effort on my end except to say, yeah, I totally get it. That happens sometimes, and no problem. But I had to work back to my initial belief that I'm not okay, right? I had to work on my belief about myself, because if I believed I wasn't okay, and whenever I felt hard emotions, I sort of got it escalated, I would see that moment in my daughter as, she's not okay. There's something wrong. And my willingness to stay steady with her required me to challenge those beliefs I had about myself and about her.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm sure there are people listening who were just listening to your example and thinking, "Oh, I don't know, like that." Yes, like I would have totally tried to fix that. That would have been 100% my immediate reaction. And so I think that really sheds some light on this whole conversation. Like, if you don't challenge those beliefs, you're never going to change the pattern. What do you think or suspect would have happened for your daughter in that moment if you had tried to fix it? How would that experience have been different for her?
I know what would have happened, because I'm not always as streamlined. By the way, if I am not meeting my own needs, if I'm not taking care of myself, there's no way I would have had the stability and the mindset and the capacity to stay calm in that moment. So I'm sure you and I both agree on this. The best way to take care of our children is to take care of ourselves, because if I'm depleted, I'm not going to respond that way. Right? Yes. I'm not going to be able to find calm in my body. I know or imagine that what would have happened is I may have gotten some anxiety in my body because she's sad and she doesn't know why. And my brain may have gone to, "Oh my God, is she depressed? did something happen? Is there something she's not telling me? She's 15. Is she going to like, what's happening? Is she like, beating herself up in her brain? Is she going to start, self-harming? I mean, we can go into all kinds of places, right? She would have
Yes.
felt my anxiety because I would have started asking her a bunch of questions, and she would have seen now this is also a daughter who she's very like most kids are, but she's very sensitive, I'll use that word in quotes, to other, she can feed off other people's moods and emotions so she would have gotten anxious, she would have gotten scared by how she felt. Her sadness would now turn into anxiety, and we would both be caught in this chaos of emotion that was far beyond the initial baseline emotion of sadness. I mean, we have all been there. And that's why maternal and child mental health are so deeply interconnected, because our children are borrowing from our nervous systems. Yeah. So if I have a fear-based belief about emotion or whatever the thing is, and I react to something that actually in and of itself is not a problem, I do not believe it's a problem when our children feel sad. I think it's human. It's very, especially for a 15-year-old. I mean, she's so full of all this stuff. So if we can just calm ourselves, stay steady in response to our children's emotions, we're sending the message. That is a proud moment for me, given the work I've done about this deep hidden belief that I'm not okay, because I truly believed in that moment, Alyssa, that she was okay. I really believed that she could both feel sad and be okay at the same time. I didn't dismiss her and disregard her. I didn't say, go be sad in your room by yourself. I mean, I checked in. Do you need anything from me? She's a very independent kid. All she needed was for me to give her permission to trust herself that going to dance today was not the right thing for her to do, and to honor that. And then she put on her earphones and she listened to music and she worked through it. And by, an hour later tops, she had moved through it. So I know exactly what would have happened if I had responded differently.
Because you've been there and done that.
That's right. Many times.
Okay, so we could go all day. We could have a conversation all day about this, but we are running out of time. So, Kate, tell us a little bit about how people can connect with you, women who are listening to this and being like, yep, I need to do more work on this. I need to know more. Tell us how they can find you.
Yes. So if you are a mom with a young child, let's say 0 to 6, 0 to 5, and you are struggling with emotional overwhelm, guilt, anxiety, burnout, all those things that so many of us do, I created a 12-week program called the Calm Connection System, which is designed based on neuroscience, based on what we know from, all the evidence around nervous system management and parent-child attachment. It's a program that's designed to change the way your brain works with respect to those beliefs, thoughts, feelings, results in 12 weeks. So if people are interested in learning more about that, I will send you a link where they can watch a little masterclass that talks more about that, Alyssa, and they can find all my information about how to get in touch with me from that. I'm also very active on Instagram. So if anyone wants to come find me at Kate Kripke on Instagram, I love meeting people over there on the back end. So that's where people can find me.
Awesome. That sounds great. We will put all of those links from Kate in the show notes or below the video if you're on YouTube. Thank you so much, Kate, for taking the time to have this conversation with us.
Yeah. Thanks for being in the hot seat. You spoke for all of us.
Yes. Well, I think so many of us, really, as moms, so many of us have the same issues. Like, we can relate so much to each other because we're all kind of in the same boat in so many ways.
That's right.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. It's been a really powerful conversation. And to all of you listening, thanks so much for joining us again for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit www.coachingwithalyssa.com/podcast. And while you're there, book your free consultation and download the preview of my new book, Marriage is Hard and Other Lies I Believed. I'll see you in the next episode.